host.
Great.
Bear with me. All right, everybody, good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Dionne Mischler. I head up SalesClass.ai as well as Inside Sales by Design. So thank you so much for joining. We are super excited to have Shannon Gregg join us. Shannon and I have known each other for years. She is one of those amazing individuals and just awe-inspiring. And every time she and I talk, and we've known each other for probably 8+ years at this point, if not longer, just such an inspiration and what she's doing and how she's doing it. And this topic is so important. I can't even begin to tell you. I know Shannon is getting her PhD. She's a dancer. She's a mom. She's so many facets to the personality, as we all do. So I hope we can dive into some of that as well with everyone. So thank you for joining a live session. We are recording it. This will be available in the Sales Class Live resource section for everybody. So if you get a chance, go ahead and make sure you're subscribed and joined there. But given all of that, so thank you for joining. Shannon is a master presenter and facilitator, so I know we are in for a huge treat. And Shannon, if I don't need to make you a host to share and move, then I won't. Are you good?
I think we're good as long as you can see my screen. You see the SalesClass.ai header?
Absolutely. Does everybody see that? And I love the reaction button for everybody. If you haven't tried that little gem out, I like that one. Go ahead and do that. So Shannon, without further ado, yes, everybody found the reaction button. I know, it just made my day. So I will go ahead and turn it over to you. And Shannon, tell us a little bit about yourself and then let's dive in. And everybody on the call, open forum Q&A, okay? And I love this title, so thank you for joining.
Grand. Thank you so much, Dionne. And thank you for all that you're doing for everybody in my favorite profession of sales. So SalesClass.ai is something that I think we've all needed for such a long time. And I just marvel at what you're putting together. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for everybody who's joined us. I'll quickly tell you my story. One of the things I like to do best, I can remember the first time I heard, try to work smart and not hard. And I was like, but what if you do them both? What if you can be really thoughtful about the things that you're doing? So you can use that same approach that was used in the Industrial Revolution, where automation was really born in terms of the assembly line. And what are the ways that we can look at saying, how can we apply that to the sales profession? And so what I started doing, I also started in sales and software sales 20 years ago, selling nuclear non-proliferation software, which exposed me to some really interesting things like government buying scenarios and partnering. And so I think one of the ways that I found is when you're really reliant on other people to help you with your sales process, in terms of really getting there and being as productive as you can, compartmentalizing and thinking about how you can approach that is really, really important. And as we all know, in sales, we're always thinking about revenue. How can we drive revenue? How can we produce more revenue? How can we influence more revenue? And so that is something that I've been thinking about my whole life. I've spent most of my life leading sales operations teams in the clinical trial technology space. And a few years ago, I started a Salesforce.com consulting business, which has seen double growth every year since we've been around. And there are quite a few people out there who are interested in us taking the same approach and applying it to their sales technology. So I'm going to teach you some really interesting strategies today that you can use to apply to your sales team, your sales approach, and that whole sort of golden triangle of productivity, the people, process, and technology. I've got a little book on it that you can see over there on the left-hand side, which you can find, or just reach out to me and I'll be happy to send you one. So I, like Dionne said, am just about to wrap up my PhD. I'm really, really close to being done with it. And I'm going to tell you some of the things that I've learned while working on that and how you can apply those to your sales approach, your sales motions, and your sales team today. So I want to tell you a customer story before we get started in what I think was probably one of the most challenging transitions for a sales team to move from what they affectionately called the sneaker net, which is anytime they had a challenge or they had a customer request or a purchase order or a renewal, somebody would take that call, write it down on a piece of paper, and run it down to the warehouse. So you see that picture on the left-hand side? That's what they were doing. You know, in 2019, that's what they were doing. They'd been around for 100 years. They were doing loads and loads of business. And so one of their challenges was, this is the way we've always done it. How do we take our, in some cases, aging and set in their ways customer service team, inside sales team, and territory or partner sales team, and tell them it's time to change. You've got to move everything to the internet now. Some people had been there since the day they started working. They'd been doing things the same way for a really long time. And so what we did was applied all these principles that I'm about to show you to show them, here's what's in it for you. Here's how you can take this process that you've been doing for a really long time, this sneaker net approach, and here's how you can move it into a way that will be more productive for you, that will allow you to see more accountability from not only yourself, but the people that you're working with, and will help you to revolutionize the way that you are able to be productive with your sales motions. So yeah, feel free to use that sneaker net thing. I love it. We all know, you know, as soon as I said it, every single one of you was like, yes, I know that person, or you may even be that person, and that's okay. That's okay. It's perfectly fine. We all have ways we like to do things. I can remember when I first started working on those 90-page government RFPs when I was selling nuclear non-proliferation software, we would take the RFP and we would cut it into pieces and tape it to the wall and put Post-it notes underneath it of what we were going to do, because that's what we did. And that felt good. It felt like a good productive process. Like, yes, we whiteboarded the heck out of that thing today, but I'm going to teach you how you can move from where you are now to where you want to be and help your team members do the same thing with you. So good change management is what drives change adoption. So think for just 1 second about a time that you had to change the way you did something. Maybe your favorite store got acquired and it changed its name, or the store that you keep going to switched where they had the health and beauty aid products and the produce. Even those small changes really throw you off guard, because as human beings, we travel just like, you know, electrons. We want to take the path of least resistance. We want to do the thing that has predictable results, because if we don't, what sits on the other side is fear. And that's really what one of the biggest challenges is we have, is that people are afraid. So if you've got top producing salespeople, those A producing salespeople, and you tell them, we have to change. We have a new product or service. There's a new way to enter this in CRM. A new different team is going to be taking on delivery. Anything that you do to throw off their sales process, it automatically incites fear for them, because they're afraid they're not going to be the best at their job anymore, afraid they're not going to be that A player because some other new thing has been introduced to the way that they run their lives or their book of business. And that's so hard. That's so hard. So that's the first thing that I want you to keep in mind. People don't resist because they want to. People resist because they're afraid not to. So what I'm going to teach you about today, before we pull somebody onto the hot seat, which is the star show of these SalesClass.ai live sessions, that's going to be so much fun, is 3 different approaches and theories that you can apply to your sales process, your sales people, or your sales technology, or all 3. So we'll cover change management theory, which is incredibly important when you're giving a change to somebody, not just dump it on them and run away like the place is on fire. The diffusion of innovations theory and the adult learning theory. You're laughing, Dionne, because you've seen this before, right?
Yes, and sometimes I still do it, even though I know I'm not supposed to, right? And it normally results in, has a very bad outcome.
It normally does, right? Because when you know, here's the change that has to be made, you've been thinking about it for so long. When you're giving it to your team, they're like, what is this new news? What's this new information?
Down. Yeah, normally it results in my sixth grader crying, or, you know, adults just walking away going, yeah, that was awesome, peace out.
Right? Exactly right. Exactly right. And that's how you're starting to build up that sort of wall of resistance, right? They didn't come to that conversation saying, I'm going to resist whatever change Dionne's going to throw at me today.
And that's a really good point too, Shannon, right? People don't wake up going, oh, I'm just going to say no to everything that comes at me.
No, we don't like to say no. We don't even like to say no when we know we should be saying no, right?
Very true. Yeah.
Super true. So we're going to learn a little bit about these and how you can apply them to whatever it is that you are trying to motivate people to do. And you can use this with your sales team, but you can also use this at home. It works at home. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk to you about is the diffusion of innovations. This is one of my favorite theories, and you can see it's in a traditional bell-shaped curve, and the numbers, they line up exactly that way all of the time, all the time. So when there's a big group of people, if you can say, okay, which one of these people are the innovators, right? Who are the ones that when you say, you know what, we've made a change in the way that we're going to recognize revenue, and I need somebody to try it out. Those are the ones that raise their hands. These are the people that are like, wow, there's new technology. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to buy it right now. You know, when the virtual reality goggles came out, they bought them. They didn't know how to use them. They didn't know what they were going to do with them, but it was new and it was cool. And so they wanted to do it. You already know who these people are. If you're one of these people, you know it. They're not quiet or shy about it. They tell you all the time, I've got this new thing. You should check out this new thing. They love new restaurants. They love to go to new cities that are now new and hot. So you know who they are. The early adopters, they'll watch those innovators try the things. They'll figure out what the beta test breaks are. They'll wait until they do that hard work, and then they come in and say, I'm going to try it too. Most of the people that you work with in this curve, and probably all of the time, 68%, so anywhere between 60 and 70%, those people are the majority. And this can work if you're launching a new product, if you're launching a new service, or you're launching a new process internally. Most of the people are going to do it because they can see the bugs have been worked out, the kinks have been worked out, the value proposition has been proven, and they're going to come in and try it too. These are the people that are going to say, okay, everyone else is trying it. I can see it's happening. It works. I'm going to do it too. And then the rest of the 16% of the people sit on the end. Those are the laggards. You know these ones. These are the ones that are on your sales team that are like, nope, never going to enter anything in the CRM system. And you start to think of the ways to get them to do it. And you're like, okay, what if we only pay commission if something has been in the CRM system? And they say, okay. And they enter it. And on the same day, magically, it's closed won. And then you say, well, I'm not going to pay you commission until I can see it's traveled its way through the whole entire sales cycle. Those are the ones that will be your biggest challenge whenever you're trying to change something. Now, it's not like all the time, you know, Dionne's going to be an early adopter. Dionne may be an early adopter of technology because she loves it, but she may not be an early adopter to a specific process that runs in the project management realm after things move the sales from the sales floor because she doesn't know as much about it. So it's not as easy as putting somebody in a category all the time, but chances are pretty good somebody's always going to stay in the same sort of quadrant of this bell curve. So keep that in mind. That's going to be really helpful for you as you're trying to think how to motivate people and how to get them to do the things that you want them to do as you're moving them along the eagerness cycle for the change that you're trying to implement. This one is so important. So Dionne just mentioned that she's got kids, and she's got kids who are in school. And I got to tell you, having kids in school during a global pandemic is a huge challenge. It's emotionally a challenge. It's process-wise a challenge. It's technology-wise a challenge. It's a challenge for everybody. But I'll tell you something. The people who are at the bottom of that, which are the children that are learning, what they're doing is called pedagogy. That PED word, you recognize it from pediatrician, right? That means kids. So children learn because they're told to. That's how they're wired. Children are told, you know, this is the topic you're going to learn about. Right now for the next 40 minutes, we're going to do math. And then after that, for 40 minutes, we're going to do social studies. And they sit down and do it, not always with a great amount of eagerness, but they do it because they're told to. Adults, what's called andragogy, totally different situation. Adults, they want to know why they have to learn it, and they're going to decide how successful it is what they're going to learn. So when I talk about learning, that can be anything from a small informal interaction where you say, I'm going to show you how to log onto your computer now. We now have two-factor authentication. This is how to log on your computer. That's a really small interaction, all the way to something that's a huge, giant implementation where you're saying, okay, you have to learn a whole new system now. We have a new sales process. We used to use Miller-Heiman. Now we're going to use Sandler. And so you have to basically take everything that you used to know and used to do, and we're going to do it a different way. So it can be any amount of learning, formal, informal, small, big. Adults are always going to approach it with these same sort of 4 things that I'm going to tell you about, that I want you to consider as you're trying to roll out a change to a group of people, like salespeople, who are very motivated by driving revenue. Sales managers who are very motivated by driving their sales team to get to sales revenue, right? We have a singular focus, so we know what's going to motivate them. But now we have to get underneath it to say, here's how I want you to understand how what you're learning and what you're doing is directly going to impact revenue growth, because that's what we want, right, in sales.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, yeah, no, don't you think so, Dionne? I mean,
yeah. Yeah, I agree with you on all of this. And so I'm going to throw out too, for those of you that have come up against quote unquote difficult people in your learning environment or on your teams, I think number 4, Shannon, totally reading ahead. I think all of this makes so much sense, and this is the slow down to speed up, right? And so if we're leading a new change, we can go ahead because we've been in the planning meetings and all this other stuff, right? And we come in and we dump, but we don't go through these 4 steps with everybody. And so I would just, keep that in mind, especially if you've got somebody that quote unquote may or may not be difficult, but even my 8-year-old he's 100%. If you don't tell him the why, he does not care, right? And if he's not a part of the process, and so if you extrapolate some of that out to some of the adults that we work with, I mean, man alive, sometimes, so you can go through this and still have somebody be resistant, but I think it's, really understanding that it's all about the why and having people be part of the process at the end of the day, versus delivering a lot of what. So yeah, I think this is amazing. And I agree.
So I think what you're saying, Dionne, is exactly what is the best approach here, which is our best salespeople, our consultative salespeople, the ones that we would say, they get it. They know exactly what selling is. Selling is a journey that you take with your customer, not you leading them to water. You figuring out, is water the thing that they need? That's the exact same approach that you should take for figuring out how to help these adults, these salespeople that you're working with, get to where they need so they can say, yes, this new change that you're imparting upon me, that is exactly what I need, right? So we're taking that consultative sales approach and applying it to training people to whatever you're changing.
Yep.
Yeah. So the 4 steps are pretty simple. If you're into screenshots, I would tell you this is something that you should definitely screenshot, because as you're figuring out what your change is, taking these 4 steps, again, they don't have to be giant. It doesn't have to be something that you say, I'm going to sit down and come up with a whole big project plan. I'm going to do the whole thing, but just consider them, keep them in mind. This is a very small punch list for you to say, have I involved some of the people who are ultimately going to be the consumers of what we're doing, how we're rolling this change out? That's the same as when you're in the sales seat saying, do I have the right people? Do I have the people who are making the purchasing decision? Do I have their opinions, right? It's the same thing. The adult learner's experience. What experience level are they bringing? And so are you going to teach everybody the same way? Or do you have some people who are brand new to the sales floor, who are primarily going to be focused on prospecting, and they're just thinking, how can I take what you're saying and put it into a place where I can plug and play it? Or are they people who have been through many changes before, who've maybe seen changes that didn't stick, who've maybe worked at places where they've tried something like this before and they have good ideas? So think about their experience. The next one is thinking about their relevance and the impact to their lives, because who's ever had to sit inside of one of those, I think, dreaded hour-long trainings that are rolled out because of regulations, right? The worst. Especially when we're in sales. Every 15 minutes matters, right? Because for 15 minutes, you could reach out and have a great conversation with a client, prospect, or somebody you're trying to win back. Yep. So if you want me to sit down and learn something for an hour, it better be really relevant. I better see how it's going to immediately impact how I can be better at sales, right? Then the last one, which is Dionne's favorite, is making sure it's problem-centered. So don't just say, I'm going to deliver all this training to you and you're going to change everything. That's why I'm going to give it to you and you're going to love it when it's done. Well, they want to know why. What are we solving? And I think, Dionne, you hit the nail on the head when you said it's not just the what, It's really the why.
Yeah, I agree with you, Shannon. It's like people have to know what hill they're taking every day and why, and they want to know you're supporting and they've got a voice in it and all that good stuff, right? They don't necessarily want to be in charge, but most people just simply want to be heard. And I agree. And I think kind of going back to number two, we I believe in kind of the no show do method, right? And just the teaching and then having somebody teach it back and stuff. And then one of my clients, I guess there's a name for it. It's called the catch ball theory, right? And I didn't know, but it's that and when you teach it, right? And so that the teacher is teaching the student, and then the student is doing it with a teacher, then the student is doing it on their own, and then the student is teaching back, right? And so I had been incorporating that into a lot of my sales training for years. And so, but that's kind of the theory behind it. And it's so true, right? And you can see it in the in so many ways where it's like, hey, how did that go? Well, demonstrate or teach it back, right? Serious Decisions calls it a teach back. So however you doing it.
I think I can remember sitting in an AAISP event probably 10 years ago, Dionne, and you talking about the teach back and me thinking, yes, that's exactly it. We hear so many sports, references in sales, because when we think about it, when you think about a baseball player, what are they doing over there in the dugout before they come out? They're practicing. They're still practicing. They're literally professionals. They've gone through every single level of baseball and they're still practicing. And so I think anytime you can get somebody to teach back or do a role play, nobody likes it. It makes you, again, it goes back to that sort of fear. Your amygdala is saying like, fight or flight, fight or flight. But the only way you can get good at something is practicing it. And that makes people feel uncomfortable. But when you do a teach back, that's such a good way of saying, okay, you've heard this information. Now let's put it into action without trying it on a customer first, right?
Yeah, don't practice on your customers.
No, or they may not be your customers. Maybe not for long. So how do you do it? How do you change the minds of these people? And I can remember spending a really long time trying to get to the bottom of one particular guy I worked with who was, when I tell you he was the A player, we had probably 100 sales reps, maybe a few more than 100 sales reps. And he was number one. And by number one, I mean numbers 2, 3, 4, and 5 did not add up to the same amount of quota busting this guy was doing. He could not stand entering things into Salesforce. He just didn't like it. Everybody knows this guy, right? Like you've all got this guy.
Yes, there's always one.
And he's like, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do it. You're not going to make me do it either, because my results are so amazing. You won't make me do it. And we tried everything. Like, hey, we need to figure out who's going to deliver this, because if you sell it, we know from contract signature to delivery, there's a 12-week process that has to happen. He's like, yeah, that's your problem, not mine. Okay. And the types of resistance that you'd come across with this type of person. And once I read this theory right here, I was like, this is the one. This is the one. This is a very simple process. It's from 1967. Professor Lewin put it out there, and it's now known as one of the most seminal pieces of work in terms of organizational change management. Now, what's funny is he came out with this as a way to help individuals change. And then in the 1980s, thinking of how to make an organization as a sort of symbiotic, holistic group of people change, that became something that people started thinking about in the 80s. How do I make the entire sales team change? Where it used to be, how do I make Bud change? How do I make Claire change? How do I make Andrew change? In the 80s, they started thinking about how do we make this whole organization shift? And I think you probably all know what that was tied with, or by all, I mean the people that are the same age as I am. That became like a really common era for mergers and acquisitions. So people were interested in saying, how do I get this whole entire organization to want to continue to work for us? We bought them because they have a good value. We want them to stay here. So Professor Lewin came out with these 3 steps. Again, you can try this out in really small ways. You can try it at home, you can try it on individuals, but you can try it on your whole entire sales team. So the first step is, and I love this picture because it just gives you that mental image of what are the 3 steps I have to do. The first one is unfreeze. So you start to take the way that things have been done and you start to undo it. So the way that something has been done and you start to change very slowly, right? An ice cube doesn't go from a full ice cube to melted to a new ice cube in a quick step. It takes some time. So you use this iterative process to say, how do I unfreeze the way that we've already done the thing, whatever the thing is you're trying to change? That second step, which is the most important one, that's where the change happens. So that's where you say, okay, dear sales team, the way that we used to recognize revenue and the way that we used to give you your quota, it used to be like this. We've now taken it apart to show you this is why it can't be this way anymore. Maybe the finance team has recognized something about their good accounting principles that have to change. So you start to explain to them how it's going to change. You make the change. And the last one is you refreeze. So a lot of people forget about that third step. A lot of times people will say, okay, here's the way it used to be done. Here's why we can't do it anymore, and now change. And they forget reinforcing habits takes a really long time. And you have to do it. You cannot skip step 3, or else people will sort of fall back into the way they used to do it. Now, you know in your brains, every year on January 1st, everybody signs up to go to the gym because this is going to be the year they finally get into shape. And what do a lot of people say? They say, in 21 days, you've built a habit. Now, recent research has shown that's actually a fallacy. There's no such thing as the 21-day build a habit, but so many people believe it. It's such a strong placebo that it actually works. So you look for a way to say, okay, you used to do it this way, we're changing it, and now I'm going to reinforce that, strongly for the next 21 days. So whatever it is that you're trying to get your people to change, whatever that sort of thing is, you say, like, we now know there's a way for us to do better at finding revenue and our sales. You want to take them through those 3 steps. I know you've done this before, Dionne, because you and I have talked a lot about how to motivate people to change and apply these steps. And we've actually talked about how we do this in our households too.
Absolutely. And, I think it's so interesting because I'll be talking with teams and, it's a lot of people want a quick fix, and it's just, there is no silver bullet for anything, right? It takes us, just like you're showing here, so much time to develop whatever mess we're in. You cannot undo it, right? And so we were doing some coaching and training with the team, and I said, we're going to teach, we'll present everything, these 5 different topics or whatever, but you need to take month over month and focus on this particular skill set, right? Whether it's asking questions, opening a call, what you're changing and how you're changing it, and you need to coach to it for 3 weeks. Nobody likes that answer. And this particular organization was like, yeah, no, we're not doing it. And I said, well, then first off, we can't work together. Secondly, you're not going to be successful. Right. And thirdly, let's hope your board doesn't ask why. So, you know what I mean? And so that's the thing, is we have to slow down to speed up and build into everything we're doing here, especially when it's systems and stuff, just how are we reinforcing it? And it takes time, and there's no way around it.
There's no way around it. And I think, coming from you, Dionne, is a powerful testament, because you're working with so many teams at once. So you have the interesting ability to be able to see a lot of people trying to make this change work at once, instead of sitting inside of an organization where you're trying to right the Titanic. You get to see a lot of boats that are moving at one time.
Yeah.
Hey.
We kind of come in and come out and get a little bit of the perspective at the end of the day.
Right.
It's hard when you're in it. I mean, we've all been there. It's hard.
Oh, that doesn't matter at all.
Hey, Brittany, thanks for joining. I'm going to go ahead and mute you. And so I think for us, we need to be able to build our plan internally, and then somebody on the team needs to be, the perspective coach. And I think the other thing is just know that when you're implementing big change, right? So every client I've worked with and every time I've stood up an inside sales team, just for that example, right? I tell people, I'm like, it's a 3-year change. Again, nobody likes that answer. But think back to some of the big things that you've done. College is a 4-year journey. A law degree is a 3-year journey. You know what I mean? So let's be real about what we're trying to do here. And so think, about some of these changes you've seen within an organization, and you just, it is what it is. And so pack your patience and get after it and be able to dive into the tactical and then zoom out for the strategic.
It's so true. I got an email yesterday from Medium, And somebody had written an article that said 6 ways to hack your way into new revenue this week. And I was like, there's no hacking into new revenue, right? Because if it was that easy, you would have done it already. And I think a lot of times when we say, we recognize that our sales approach or our sales motions need to change, and these are the ways that we're going to change with it. Our buyers are changing. They're constantly changing. The way that they buy is so different. I mean, I literally can remember a time where you would sit across from somebody and you'd hand them a pen and you'd be like, do we agree on that? All right, sign this contract. It does not work that way anymore. And so as our buyers change, we have to change in response to that. And so one of the things that we really have to do is to help people to understand what the change is going to be. And it may be challenging, and it may be something that really is hard for them to imagine doing. But what we're really trying to stay focused on is, how do we maintain the change and encourage the change while also giving the most available revenue generating time we can to our sales teams, right? So that is something that I'm constantly thinking about. How do we make sure that we can say, okay, dear sales team, here's where it's going to be. We're going to change the way you're doing things, and then we're going to refreeze them. But I'm keeping an eye on making sure that you still have the most amount of time you can to delight your customers, because that's literally what we're here doing, right? So the next process I want to show you, if you like that 3-step one and you're like, yes, sure, Shannon, Dionne, that's cool, but we have a really complicated system and we have some very complicated people, and we don't just have, an inside sales and a territory sales team. We've got sales engineers, and we've got partners, and we've got channels, and we've got so many things that are complex that there's no way that 3-step thing will work. And if that's the case, then I want to introduce you to Cotter, who sort of took Lewin's early research and said, I'm going to give you 8 steps now. This 8-step process is one that I use all of the time when I'm working with a sales team who's saying, okay, we now have to make major changes to our sales process. So the first thing that you want to do, and I like that this is bucketed in 3 colors, is you want to create that climate for change. Dionne and I were talking earlier about how a lot of times by the time we present this to our sales team, we already know here are going to be the struggles, here are going to be the challenges, here are going to be the big benefits. This is why it's worth us doing this disruptive sort of approach so that we can get to a place that's better. They don't. They haven't been privy to those discussions. They haven't thought about the best way to roll it out. You might have brought them in to be stakeholders to say, okay, what's the best way for you to receive this learning? How can we do this in a way that will work for you? Maybe, but we have to give them that climate for change. So the 3 steps in here that I think are important and actually pretty easy to carry out is, 1, you've got to create that sense of urgency. And that goes back to what's in it for me, right? You have to help them say, this is what we're going to change. This is why you're going to be so pumped to do it. And be honest with them. These are some of the things that will be challenging for you. And that's okay. We're going to get through it together. We're here for it, right? The next is create a coalition. So I love to use governance boards and say, okay, if you're going to be rolling out a brand new CRM system, we know who it's going to affect. So we got to bring in somebody from finance, somebody from operations, somebody from project management, somebody from sales, somebody from customer success. That's going to be our coalition. And they're going to be the ones that can act as your change agent when you're not always there listening. And now that so many of us are working from home, it's a little harder to pick up that gossip that you used to be able to get when you were making yourself a fresh cup of coffee in the afternoon, right? It was easy for people to say, I don't like the thing you're doing, and here's why. It's a little harder to tell somebody that when you have to make a Zoom meeting to tell them about it. So find that coalition of people that's going to say, I'm going to act in your behalf, and I'm going to help you to make that change. The next one is develop your vision and strategy for the people that are going to be changed, for your sales team. What's their vision and strategy? Probably different than yours if you're the leader of this change, right? So that is helping you to create a climate of change. The next one is engaging and enabling the whole organization. Press one of your little reaction buttons down here on the bottom of the Zoom if you've ever in your organization heard, muttered, or seen the word silos. Have you ever heard about silos in an organization? Oh my goodness. That seems to be, I see a lot of people saying yes. That seems to be one of the most challenging things in so many organizations is these silos. Well, I'll tell you, a lot of that came out of that research I told you about in the 1980s where people were saying, okay, We can be super, super efficient if everybody just becomes a specialist in what they do. Or if they're a generalist, it's just in their area. People in finance don't need to know the sales process. They just need to receive the contracts and put them into invoicing and call it a day. Well, guess what that did? That created those silos, right? I don't know about you all, but I cannot drive past, sort of farmland and seeing a silo and thinking about, well, that is a business buzzword I'd like to get rid of. And the way to do it is let's get rid of the silos. So engage and enable the whole organization in a way that is appropriate for you, for the thing that you're trying to change. So let them know the vision, even if they're not involved. So a lot of times when we're doing Salesforce.com rollouts, I will say, it doesn't matter if there are people who will not have Salesforce licenses, who will not be looking at Salesforce reports. Let's tell them about it. Let's send them a message that says, hey, our organization, we're going to be switching to Salesforce now. You're going to hear some of the people in the sales and customer success teams talking about it. What does that mean for you? It means that the people who are sitting in these organizations are now going to have hyper efficiency, productivity, accountability in a way that is going to make their jobs easier, better, and more streamlined. So if you hear people talking about it and you're curious about it, just let us know. We're here for it. So let them know what your vision is, and don't make it feel like they aren't allowed to know it, because they're going to hear about it. The next is to empower action. Hey, if you have any suggestions, send them back to us. We're in sales, right? Everybody in this call's on sales. Call to action. Don't send an email or leave a voicemail without a call to action. And your change management approach is the same. Let people know there's going to be some action. The most important one on this whole entire slide is quick wins. Quick wins. So this works in all aspects of change. It doesn't matter what you're trying to change. Look for little ways that has worked and let people know about it. Become your own PR agency. Hey, we rolled out a brand new change. Yes, we have a new sales approach, but guess what? Bud used it, and we saw that he had 10% more opportunities created in Q3 than he did in Q2 when we didn't have this approach. That was a really great thing. Congratulations to Bud. If anybody has any questions, let me know, or just ask him, because he can tell you, here's something that has worked for him because he was able to implement this new sales process. So look for ways to deliver those quick wins and let people know about it. Then they'll feel a little bit less scared about the change plan and a little more excited to do the thing that you want them to do. And the last one is, you remember I told you in Lewin's that step 3 is the hardest one, because a lot of people are like, done and dusted, the change is over. Here's something that's interesting about change. It's never over. It's never, ever over. So you want to look for ways to sustain the change. So keep taking those little wins and use that to drive additional change, right? People need that. And then make sure it's really embedded in your culture. And you can do that in all sorts of ways that are fun. You can send little notes, text messages, gifts, send somebody a postcard in the mail, whatever it does to say, like, thank you so much. I know that this is hard. I know this is something that's getting in your way, but you're such a great ambassador of it. And here's some things that I see that are really helpful. So this is the last one I want to tell you about, and this is a good way for you to evaluate an organization. I know we've got a lot of sales leaders on this call, so this might be something you use for your whole entire team. It may be something you use to look at your whole entire organization, not just your sales organization, but your whole entire company. And so as you're looking at this, I want you to just sort of use this as a way to say, our organization may be at level 4 in terms of our sales process. We're quantitatively managed. And guess what? Sales teams are quantitatively managed. We really are, right? We're always saying, okay, what's our target? What's our new target? What's our target? We're about to come into fourth quarter. And I don't know about you guys, but I bet everybody's thinking really hard about fourth quarter, right? Because that's the time of year where we say, we know this is the end of it, right? Like if we didn't preload quarters 1 through 3 by going above and beyond our quota, we've got a lot of work to do. And in the United States, especially, we've got Thanksgiving and we've got, the winter holidays. So we don't have quite as many days in office as we did before. So we're thinking about that quantitatively. That's where we sit when we're in sales, which is great. But there may be other things you're trying to roll out where you can say, yeah, you know what? We're in level 2. Our sales to service handoff, we might be in level 2. Like we give all the information, we send them the contract and we say, hey, project management, delivery, good luck with that. Be really nice to that customer. I'm depending on them for 3 years of commission, right? So look at that in a way that's sort of spread out so you can say, where are we? And that will help you to take those last 2 slides in an approach to put them in place. So
Yep.
that will be really helpful for you.
Yep, I agree. I think it's about that harmonization, right? So for everybody on the call, if you are wanting to kind of raise your hand and put yourself on video and chat with Shannon about something you have going on, let's pick it apart. So for sure.
Yeah, so some of the things that people commonly are experiencing as change problems, if anybody's got one that you want to puzzle through for a couple of minutes here, a lot of times it is a new piece of technology. So you might be rolling out an auto dialer, or you might be the recipient of a new piece of technology, like your customer service team has a new ticketing system, but your sales team needs to understand how it works so that they can be responsible. Those are pretty common. Like I mentioned before, if you're switching your sales process, if you used to have a really defined sales process and now you're moving to a new one, that's one that's really hard for people, because when they know, okay, step one is like, this is the way that our sales approach goes, let's do it. Anytime you change that, that's a really challenging thing. So there's big changes like that, that I think people are often faced with. And so, I'll always say to them, I just want to go back here. Start to think about just those 3 steps first. Think about those 3 steps first. So when you've got that big change you're looking at, how can you just put it into these 3 buckets? Okay, so we get it. This is the way we used to look at our commission sheets every month, and we're going to do it differently. And here's how we're going to do it from here on out.
I agree. Bud, Claire, I know you guys have so much going on within your organization. Would you like to volunteer and pick one piece of your overall puzzle?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a lot of things going on, and this is probably going to sound a little negative for the organization, but I think there is a lot of this that goes on, and at least from the sales operations team, I think all of us recognize change management as a critical part of a project. And I've tried a variety of methods. It is a really long haul to get folks to change. So this is a great refresher for, making sure we formally insert this into some of the major changes that are coming up, right? I think that's one of the things as a takeaway for me. We still have a whole adoption issue with, I think, Salesforce, right? It's getting better, but there really is this resistance, and I've seen it in the other organizations, of why do I have to put stuff in the system? And as an employee-owned company, we don't have that leverage I've had available to me with incentives, right? So bonus is a very powerful change manager.
Yeah,
right?
Claire.
People like to think money doesn't matter, but it's a driver for 95% of the PayPal, if not 99, right? So I think that we're rolling out a lot of things, and I think we face that challenge that we are bringing the innovation to the organization versus the leaders coming to us. And we're often perplexed by that too, right? They don't know what they don't know. They're not staying current. They don't know it's possible, so we're bringing it to them. So anything that you can give us on tips on that, right?
That's a great one, Claire. Who do you report to? Who does sales ops report into? What organization? Sales or finance or?
The COO, so he's got operations and sales.
Okay.
And my boss happens to be on here too, so.
Your partner.
My partner in crime.
I love it. This is one of the things that I have found to be a huge struggle, is that sales operations teams generally think like operators, which is, like process driven, logical decision making, and I think one of the things I love the most about sales operations is we're always making data driven decisions, right? So I'm looking at Salesforce to say, okay, I can see, either the whole entire sales team is struggling to move from stage 3 to stage 4. So now I know we need some training in how to handle objections, Or I can see, you know, Dionne is having a really big challenge moving from stage 3 to stage 4. So she needs individual coaching. And so sales operations as partners to the sales team, we're like, it makes so much sense. Here it is. It's in black and white. The data's telling you exactly what to do, dear sales manager. And a lot of times, you know, salespeople are like, hey, that's cool, Claire. Like, I see what you're saying, but you know what? I am $60,000 behind on my quota from last week alone, and I've got a lot to do so that I don't get fired because there's a target on my back all the time. And I think that's the struggle between sales and sales operations. That is one that, you know, the friction I think keeps us feeling hungry to solve the problem. But when you're like, hey, I'm giving you the exact information you need, and it's right here in black and white, you know, I think for this particular problem, a lot of it comes down to saying like, here's what's in it for you, you know, and getting the sales team to slow down enough to say, I see what you're saying, Claire. That makes perfect sense. Yes, I want to do it that way. You know? And I think that is one of the most challenging pieces of being, you know, a person who's in sales operations versus the person who's out there, you know, carrying this sort of, you know, bag saying like, okay, well, I got to get as many contract signatures as I can, or else I'm not going to have a job in 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think, Shannon, you're kind of calling out that coaching component, right? Of, hey, tell me why, well, in different words, why are you resistant to this? Right? But that's in essence what's happening. So,
and on top of Claire's concerns, we the time to refreeze is definitely an issue for us because we've got project on top of project, initiative on top of initiative stacked up for the foreseeable future. So it's always an impatience to get to the next thing.
It's so true. And I think, Bud, your point combined with turnover ratios for salespeople, which, you know, in general, in all industries is 18 months. That's just 6 quarters. That's not a ton of time. So if we've got somebody who starts, you know, in the first quarter of 2021, the chances that they'll be gone by summer of 2022 are pretty big. So if we're saying, well, you know, our refreeze process is 3 years, you know, if you've birthed that brand new sales baby and they have already flown the coop a year and a half later, that makes it really hard to stay on top of too.
We actually have the reverse problem because we're employee stock owned. Nobody. So you don't get any fresh blood or you don't get any fresh. Yeah.
Okay.
So that becomes a bit of a problem for change management too, is you just don't have any change in the players.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think we're trying to work with the teams directly, and it's really like we have to almost go through this, how do I say this, remedial change management with the leaders.
Yeah.
Because they often use the tools to call folks out and say, you know, if you don't put stuff in there, other people are going to see you. And if I'm on that call, I'm like, no, the real reason to do it is because how you are going to benefit by finding that information available to you when you need it and as you're interacting with customers. So is it important? Yes, that somebody may ask you why that's not in there. Absolutely. You're not meeting an expectation, but that's not the most important.
You're exactly right. And unfortunately, so many people have been told that, you know, that especially with Salesforce adoption, CRM's your big brother. If you don't put it in there, we're going to see you. And then that just, when you look at the carrot sticking out, that's just beating somebody with a stick, right?
I know. And I can't get, you know, we've got to get them to kind of break that and embrace it and say, hey, yeah, this is our standard work and these are the expectations. But reinforcing from them why it's important to be effective, to be customer centric, to be productive.
So I think, you know, it sounds like you've got a lot of people, Claire, who, and Bud, if they've been there for a very long time and they haven't, you know, either had the wealth of having somebody new come in with fresh ideas, or having been somewhere else recently where they can say, oh, I've seen it done this way, and here are some of the best ideas we can take from that. You know, you're dealing with people who are sort of all the way at the end of the diffusion of innovation curve, right? They're all the way at the end there. They're just sort of stuck there. And so one of the things I would tell you that I would do right away is start this like approach where you say, okay, I'm going to spend 6 minutes with each one of you. I'm going to spend 6 minutes. You know what I want you to do? Dionne, I want you to share your screen and show me how you enter a new opportunity in Salesforce. And watch how they do it. And I guarantee you, they're going to take like 7 more clicks than you do. And so one of the things you'll be able to do quickly, Claire, is say, you know, there's just that sort of quick find here, or you can actually click on this and you can do inline editing here without clicking edit and going through all the fields. And so you'll be able to find some ways that they'll have economy in their approach, or ways that you can say, oh, do you know, we can just change the order of your tabs all the way along here. So you don't have to keep going to the app launcher, clicking on sales, going to opportunity. There will be something that you'll probably be able to find with it. And like, who's going to say no to 6 minutes? That you'll be able to find, and they'll be like, oh, okay, well, maybe that does feel good. Okay, that's a very small thing. And then it's a quick win that you can quickly promote, that the next time you come back and say, this time we're going to spend 12 minutes because I want you to show me all the things you do, which then allows you to go back and say, is there any automation we can do here? Or can we say, like, if they do this thing, we always know these 3 things happen, and I can make Salesforce do it for them so they don't have to do it themselves.
And I like the time boxing of that too, Shannon. Parachute in, get the heck out of Dodge.
Hi, Shannon. This is Edwin.
Hi, Edwin.
I have a question. What tool do you use to track the change? Because there's a lot of steps in the change in my company and companies I worked in the past. Everybody agrees that change needs to happen. But like you said, it's a long-term process. And I haven't seen it successfully say this is how we're going to track the changes being made.
So I take
what tool?
I take this 8-step process right here, and I will create a Jira project. I personally love Jira. I'm a fan of Jira for managing any sort of project. So I will put these 8 things in there. And one of the reasons I love it is that sort of Kanban approach where you can say, here's my blocker. So I know right away, you know, like in Claire and Bud's example, the blocker might be the sales team because they haven't made this change. And so that way I can look really quickly and say, here are the pieces of change that we've been able to move around. Here are these, you know, 8 sort of mega buckets that have the sort of subtasks underneath them. And here's where we're getting stuck. And it allows me then the next time I'm putting a new sort of change approach in to go back and evaluate, here's where we got stuck. So then I can look at it and say, can I do it a little bit better this time? Or does the approach need to change? But I think
what was the tool you mentioned? I'm sorry.
I use Jira, Jira. It allows you to add like a lot of priorities. I really like it, but you can use something like a Trello board. I think Trello is a really beautiful, lightweight sort of project management tool that is a good place to start. You know, Asana is out there. Monday.com is a nice one. I've seen loads that I think are really nice, easy to use, free or sort of freemium that you can say, how do I keep this moving along? And they'll give you that sort of visual management, which everybody needs, right? Like you think about those big boards that say, it has been 82 days since our last accident. That is a really powerful thing, that visual management. So anything you can do that you can pull up and show live on a screen during one of your team meetings to say, these are 8 kind of major buckets to change, and here's where we are with all of them. It kind of brings them into that sea of change too.
And I think it serves as a reminder for those of us that are injecting the change, right? Like there's
a good word. I like that.
Follow. What were you going to say, Claire?
I like that. Injecting the change.
I mean, it's, hey, I've got a really good idea. And everybody goes, yeah, that's a great idea. You have fun with that. And you're like, wait, no, hang on a second. Right? So I think, Edwin, that's a really great point, right? And I think for ourselves, if we're on the team that's deploying this change or talking about the change, we have to follow our own process too, right? And recognizing there's some salesmanship in all of that, or salespersonship, or however you want.
Oh, tons of it.
So I think if we remember these 8 steps and okay, I'm prepping for this conversation with these folks in this department. We're talking about this. Just, it's a process, right? So just own it, follow it, love it, nurture it. Yeah.
Don't try to hack it, right? Because that's a fallacy.
I gotta tell you, I can't stand that whole, there is no hack, right?
There's no hack.
There just isn't. So yeah. Edwin, does that answer your question?
Yes, you did. I personally use Scrum, but I want to see what other tools you use.
Yeah, I think there's a lot out there, and I think probably what's important is, you know, make sure it's one that you're comfortable with and play around with it. You know, try to take your approach and put it in there and see, does this cover my needs? And you know, I think as long as it's one that helps you to say, have I covered my bases? You know, am I doing all the things I need to do to inject the change? Then it's a good tool. You know, I'm here for good enough, right? Nothing has to be perfect. It just has to be good enough, because we're all moving. We've all got quotas.
Yeah. And I think perfect is a fallacy, Shannon. I think that's a great way to approach it. And as a recovering perfectionist, I would definitely move towards doing what works. And thank you so much for presenting today and talking with us today and teaching today. We really appreciate it. For everybody on the call, there's Shannon's information. I highly recommend reaching out to her, connecting with her on LinkedIn. And again, for those of you that may have attended a previous Sales Class Live, we are an open community. So be on the lookout for some follow-up and emails and all that good stuff. Connect with each other, connect with Shannon, connect with me. I think I had put the link to join Sales Class in the chat box before, but you can definitely join that. All of our content right now, our live sessions are ungated, but they will be gated as of October 1st. And we'll be sure to have Shannon back because we want to talk about where are they now, right? So for those of you that were able to attend today and take some of these principles and move forward. So Shannon, any parting words?
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for everybody who joined, and for those of you that participated. You know, change it's always a hot topic. It will never not be a hot topic, because we're always trying to deal with the psychology of people. So stay the course, keep doing it. And I will tell you, if you have not yet joined SalesClass.ai, my jaw dropped when I saw it. I was like, Dionne, this is exactly the thing that I need, because we can't stop learning either.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to go